Hello, it's Dr. Rhonda Johnson. Today's Friday, August 27th, 2021. And today I'm going to be discussing my take on the testimony by Dr. Christina Park. Earlier this week, Dr. Christina Park, PhD, testified against vaccine employer mandates for the state of Michigan. And her testimony has gone viral on the internet and social media platforms. Now, I'm not disputing her education or her credentials, although I do disagree with her claim that PhDs are among the most vaccine hesitant. She didn't produce any data that supported that. I do agree with certain parts of her testimony, such as her assertion that many Black people won't get vaccinated because they don't trust the government. Many studies have supported that. However, there are some parts of her testimony that I feel that I must address. She talked about the messenger RNA and the COVID vaccines, and I agree with her. The COVID vaccines do not stop COVID transmission and replication in the nose and the throat. That means that the virus can enter your body if you're not wearing a mask and you're in contact with respiratory droplets or virus-infected airborne aerosols. In fully vaccinated people, the messenger RNA COVID vaccines do one major thing. They are more than 90% effective at preventing the COVID virus from reproducing billions of particles in your vital organs, which can lead to severe illness, hospitalization, and death. And I think that's the most important thing that people need to remember, that the vaccines will greatly lower your risk of dying. And in the end, I think that's a very important outcome. Now, in general, most vaccines will not prevent infection. That's the same as transmission. But most vaccines prevent the infection from spreading within your body and causing disease. Why? Because that's what vaccines do. They mimic natural infection so that when your body sees the real infecting pathogen, it has already formed an immune response, and it activates that immune response to protect you. Now, she talked about a lot of things besides the COVID vaccine. She talked about pertussis outbreaks, whooping cough. And she talked about the change from the old vaccine, which was the whole cell pertussis vaccine, to the acellular pertussis vaccine, which has been around now for at least 15 some years. And she talked about breakthrough pertussis cases. And I know personally, because I got pertussis when I was a resident at a children's hospital in Ohio. And pertussis was not fun to have. And what it is that they had to change the vaccine because the old vaccine created a high rate of adverse side effects in the old vaccine, and the new vaccine is a lot safer. In general, when we have vaccine preventable disease outbreaks, it's because we have a decline in the population of the vaccinated people, and also because the vaccine efficacy wanes over time. That's why we have to get a booster every 10 years for certain vaccines. Now, moving on, Christina Parks talks about a study which I really object to. She says the CDC suppressed data that showed the increased risk of autism in African American boys following the measles, mumps, and rubella MMR vaccine. Now, the CDC study that she talked about was in 2004, and it showed that the MMR vaccine does not cause autism. But in 2014, a chemical engineer who had no training in epidemiology took the data that the CDC published, did so-called subset analysis, and using erroneous study methodology, published a study that reportedly showed a 340% increased risk of autism in African American boys who got the MMR vaccine. Now, other scientists who were researchers looked at his methods, found lots of errors in his methods, lots of errors in his conclusions and his analysis, and the journal that published the paper retracted it. So if the studies methods are wrong, the data analysis is wrong, how do you believe the results? And there are so many Black pediatricians who are in practice that I can reassure you we would not be recommending MMR vaccine if we saw this in the real world, that MMR vaccines were causing Black boys to be autistic. And why would the MMR vaccine just target Black boys and not Black girls? To me, it just doesn't make any sense. Then Dr. Christina Parks asserted that the vaccines don't recognize the variants, and this has just not been found to be true. There's been numerous published studies that show the COVID vaccines are holding up against all these variants against severe hospitalization and death. There's so many papers, both in the United States and Israel. In fact, there was a published paper last week by researchers at the Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis in a very prestigious immunology journal. They looked at all the variants of concern, and I'll just call them by their former names, the UK, the Brazilian, and the South African variant. And they tested human antibodies produced in response to the Pfizer vaccine against all the variants. They looked at 15 different human antibodies produced after COVID vaccination from the Pfizer vaccine, and they found all but one of the antibodies could neutralize the Delta variant. Now, in plain language, this means that the Washington University School of Medicine found that the antibodies produced by the vaccine were holding up pretty well against the Delta variant. But again, these vaccines wane, the efficacy wanes over time. Now, in addition, folks, there are numerous cellular immunity components involved in vaccine-induced immunity and natural immunity. In other words, the immunity that one gets from the COVID vaccine or natural infection with COVID is not just antibody mediated, but it also involves immune cells and other proteins which help protect the tissues of the body. Defending our bodies against the COVID virus, today is Delta, in 6 months it could be some other variant, is beyond complicated. Immunology is complicated, and vaccines help that process. Lastly, she quotes a published paper that says that current COVID vaccines produce antibodies that actually help the Delta variant get inside the cells of fully vaccinated persons. I looked up her research. I looked up the paper she cited. I read this paper about 5 times, and I don't know how she reached that conclusion, because that is not what the original people who published the study stated. Again, they looked at all types of different antibodies. And again, this is very complicated stuff, but the paper presents a model of what could happen and states that the potential risk is known, has never been demonstrated in real life scenarios. Their results have been reassuring that, to the best of their knowledge, these infection-enhancing antibodies to the Delta variants haven't even been assessed. The authors state that there's a possibility and a potential risk which needs to be investigated, and that the second-generation spike protein vaccines in the future should be able to adjust and account for this. So the bottom line is, either you believe or you don't. Dr. Christina Parks is known to be against vaccination. The current word is an anti-vaccinator. Folks, you either get vaccinated and lower your risk of severe illness and death, or you take your chance and get COVID, natural infection. And if you survive, you'll have antibodies, which will protect you for a while, probably the same amount of time as vaccine-induced immunity. We do know that this Delta variant is so contagious, and your immune system, if you're healthy, hopefully it'll protect you if you decide not to get the vaccine, or if you do get vaccinated, we believe that it should protect you if you're not immunocompromised. Now, in the meantime, folks, continue to use that layered approach with masking, hand washing, and we all need to be trying to keep our immune systems healthy and be careful. That's my message today. This is Dr. Rhonda Johnson. As always, my views are my own. I hope this helps. Pass it around. I never expect to get that many likes as this video has gotten, but feel free to share.